Life, a concept so familiar yet so deeply mysterious. It's everywhere around us, thriving in every part of our planet, yet how it all starts is still a wonder. For animals, the story often begins with two special cells, smaller than a grain of sand, the sperm and the egg. Each one carries half the instructions for building a new living thing, a special mix of genetic material passed down through many generations. The egg, full of nutrients, waits patiently. Its outer layer is like a strong shield, difficult for anything to get through. The sperm, a perfectly designed swimmer, is built for this job. It carries not only genetic instructions in its head, but also special tools that can break down the egg's defenses. When a sperm fertilizes an egg, it's a tiny event, but incredibly important. Millions of sperm go on a dangerous journey, traveling through a complicated maze. But only one, if it's lucky, will get through the egg's defenses and start the amazing process that creates new life. This is where our story starts, in that one fertilized cell, a whole universe of possibility ready to grow. Imagine a vast dark ocean, and within it a single luminous spark. That spark is fertilization, the moment a single sperm cell successfully gets inside the egg's outer layer. It is a moment of incredible accuracy, a meeting of two fates, a joining of genetic material from two people to create something completely new. As the sperm goes in, an amazing change happens inside the egg. Electrical changes spread across its surface, stopping any other sperm from getting in. This makes sure that only one set of male chromosomes joins with the egg's chromosomes, making sure there's the right number for a healthy baby to grow. The egg, now fertilized, is called a zygote. It carries inside it all the genetic instructions, the DNA blueprint to build a new person. It's a single cell, yes, but it's not a normal cell. This is a cell full of possibility, a cell about to start an amazing journey. The zygote doesn't waste any time. Safe and sound in the fallopian tube, it starts its most important job, cell division. About 30 hours after fertilization, the zygote splits into two identical cells, each one a perfect copy of the other. This isn't just any split, it's the first step in an amazing journey of growth. These two cells don't just sit around, they start dividing too, copying their genetic material and splitting into new cells. With each split, the number of cells doubles, growing very quickly. This process, called cleavage, is super important because it sets the stage for the complex parts that will eventually make up the human body. The trip through the fallopian tube is dangerous and full of challenges. The zygote, a tiny bunch of cells, relies on the fallopian tube squeezing and little hairs called cilia to push it along to its final stop, the uterus. The way a zygote goes from one cell to lots of cells is really amazing. It's called mitosis, and it's like a careful dance that makes sure each new cell gets a full set of chromosomes. Chromosomes are like an instruction manual for how to build a person. Imagine a perfect ballet. Chromosomes, which look like tiny threads inside the cell, make copies of themselves so each new cell gets a full set. They line up perfectly in the middle of the cell, and then they split apart, like they're being pulled by invisible strings. Then the cell splits down the middle, making two identical new cells. This happens again and again as the zygote travels through the fallopian tube. Every time the cells divide, there are more of them, and this is how we get tissues, organs, and eventually, a whole person. Section 5. From zygote to morula, a cellular embrace. As the cells keep dividing, they also start to clump together, forming a tight ball of cells that looks like a tiny mulberry. This is called the morula stage, named after the Latin word for mulberry, and it's a big step in the early development of the embryo. The cells of the morula, even though there are more of them now, aren't just a random bunch. They are already starting to specialize, taking on different jobs that will shape the future embryo. Some cells will become part of the placenta, the important organ that will feed and support the growing fetus. Others will form the amniotic sac, a protective bag of fluid that will cushion the embryo. and still others will develop into the embryo itself, eventually growing into all the tissues and organs of the body. The trip through the fallopian tube continues, the morula pushed along by the rhythmic squeezing of the muscular walls. The environment inside the tube is carefully controlled, providing the perfect conditions for this delicate dance of life to happen. Section 6, Blastocyst, the first blueprint. As the morula enters the uterus, an amazing change happens. The ball of cells, once solid, starts to hollow out, forming a space filled with fluid in the center. This new structure, called a blastocyst, is a super important step in how an embryo develops. The blastocyst isn't just a bunch of cells anymore, it's a complex structure with different parts. The outer layer of cells, called the trophoblast, will become the placenta, the connection between the mother and the baby. Gathered at one end of the blastocyst is a group of cells called the inner cell mass. This tiny but powerful group of cells will grow into the embryo, the future baby. The blastocyst is an amazing example of how biology works. It's at this stage that we start to see differentiation, which is how cells become special and do different jobs. It's a beautiful and complex example of how life begins, all happening on a tiny scale. Section 7, Seeking Home, the journey to the uterus. After about 5 days of traveling through the fallopian tube, the blastocyst, now a delicate sphere of life, reaches its destination, the uterus. This pear-shaped organ, lined with a rich, nourishing lining called the endometrium, is where the blastocyst will try to implant and connect with the mother's body. The journey to the uterus isn't just about moving there. It's also a time of important preparation. The blastocyst keeps growing and developing, its cells dividing and changing, getting ready for the very important job of implantation. The endometrium also changes, getting thicker and filled with blood vessels, making itself ready to receive and nourish the growing embryo. When the blastocyst arrives in the uterus, it's a big turning point. It's a time of not knowing what will happen, as the blastocyst looks for the right spot to implant, a place where it can dig deep within the endometrial lining and connect with the mother's bloodstream. Section 8, the delicate dance of implantation. Implantation is when the blastocyst sticks to the wall of the uterus. It's a delicate and complicated dance between the growing embryo and the mother's body. It's a remarkable example of how bodies work together and is super important for the embryo to live and grow. The blastocyst has special cells called trophoblast cells. These cells touch the endometrium, the lining of the uterus, and release special helpers called enzymes. These enzymes help the blastocyst dig into the lining. The trophoblast cells have little finger-like parts called villi. These villi reach into the endometrium looking for blood vessels to connect to the mother's blood. This connection is really important because it lets the embryo get oxygen and food from the mother so it can grow bigger. The trophoblast and the endometrium work together to make the placenta. The placenta is like a lifeline between the mother and the baby. It gives the baby food and oxygen and takes away waste. Implantation takes a few days. It doesn't happen all at once. During this time, the embryo and the mother's body are talking to each other a lot. They use special messages called hormones and signals to make sure everything goes right during this important part of pregnancy. Section 9, a foundation for the future. The first week of life, from fertilization to implantation, is a time of amazing change. From one fertilized cell, a complex structure called a blastocyst appears, ready to start the long and amazing journey of human development. This first week sets the stage for everything that follows, starting a chain of events that will eventually lead to the formation of a new human being. The miracle of life, with all its details and wonders, starts with these simple beginnings. It shows the power of nature, how beautiful biological processes are, and the amazing potential inside a single cell. As we learn more about the details of human development, we start to really understand how precious life is and how all living things are connected.